He looked like trouble wrapped in a three-piece suit. And I was the idiot who said yes. The club pulsed like a living thing. All golden edges and velvet shadows. Bass thrummed through the bones of the bar. A steady heartbeat under the clink of glass and the hush of expensive laughter. I'd promised myself a single night off from being sensible, responsible Aiden. Excel sheet Aiden, take the early meeting Aiden, smiling through it Aiden. I wanted neon. I wanted noise. I wanted to stop thinking. Refill? The bartender's bow tie was crisp enough to cut. He skimmed a look over me that said he'd seen 100 versions of this. Young, tired, trying bravely to look like I belonged among the glittering and the bored. Something that tastes like bad decisions, I said. He smirked and handed me a glass that smelled like citrus, sugar, and the message this will be fine until it isn't. I took a sip. The bass swelled, the lights dimmed, and then the room shifted. Not the floor, my center of gravity, a ripple through the air like static. Scents layered beneath the cologne and candles, warm spice, iron gravity, the faintest brush of cedar and rain. My palms prickled. An instinct older than my polite handshake woke up and looked around. I didn't have to turn to know when he walked in. The room told me. Voices dropped, attention leaned, the lighting seemed to realign. A tall man stepped from the dark like a lesson in restraint, three-piece charcoal suit. Cufflinks catching the bar's gold, face made for magazine spreads and murder charges. His gaze found me the way a compass finds north, clean and inevitable. The air between us thinned. Trouble, my brain whispered. My heart answered, please. He took a place at the bar 2 stools down, as if gravity had rules and he politely obeyed them. Water, he told the bartender. The voice was even, edged in winter. He looked at me without quite looking, and I, because I am an idiot in a club with a heartbeat, looked back. You're not drinking? I asked. My voice came out light. My pulse did not. I am, he said, glancing at the water. Just not anything that lies. I lifted my glass. Mine sings. Another sip fizzed reckless under my tongue. Probably off-key. That almost smile happened, the one that isn't really a smile so much as a decision. Long week? Long life. I rolled my shoulders. And you? He considered that like he considered everything, briefly. Precisely. I don't do weeks, His mouth paused over a letter, as if it tasted like a secret. His eyes flicked to my wrist, where a thin chain glinted against my skin. I don't do names. Something inside me eased at the honesty. The rules were clear already, etched into the gold of the bar and the quiet. At his edges, no names, no promises, no stories that get to follow us home. The kind of night that sets itself on fire and burns out before morning. Me neither, I said. No names. No complications. Complications, he repeated, as if the syllables were a fragile thing he might break if he pressed too hard. He took a slow drink of water, watching me over the rim. What do you want then? A laugh slipped out, small and a little hoarse. To be seen. To be chosen for something that isn't safe. But I wasn't going to say that to a man whose aura said danger as fluently as mine said please be nice to me. I bruise easily under paperwork. I want, I said, to stop thinking. Temporarily, he said. Disastrously, I corrected. He set his glass down. The cut of his suit was surgical, meant to hide everything but the promise of what it hid. He didn't lean closer. He didn't need to. The space between us kept shrinking on its own. You shouldn't be here, he said, gaze skimming down. Not leering, taking inventory the way a storm takes inventory of the coast. You look like someone with a morning. That's the point. I want a night. Something shifted around his eyes, a flicker like lightning behind clouds. A warning? An apology? A night, he agreed softly, as if tasting the boundary. The bartender, sensing expensive chemistry, quietly found something else to polish at the other end of the bar. The crowd pressed and swayed, gilded and restless, but within our small radius the noise softened. I became aware of breathing, the room's, his, mine, how the bass caught our hearts and made them pretend to be the same drum. What's your favorite lie? He asked. That I'm fine, I said promptly. He nodded once, like a man who took a witness statement. And your favorite truth? I tipped my head toward him. That you're trouble. Another, almost smile. You should leave before you're right. I should, I said. But then I'd miss the disaster. He didn't touch me. He just tilted his face a fraction, letting me feel the weight of his attention the way you feel sunlight through tinted glass. The scent of cedar deepened, threaded now with the crisp metallic hush that lived in my mouth before a storm. Something in me, Omega, instinct, the old animal that knows the shape of a predator's shadow, leaned forward, baring its throat with 1,000-year-old, foolish faith. I don't take, he said, voice lower. Not if it costs more than it gives. And what does this give you? I asked. His gaze dropped to my mouth, returned to my eyes. Silence, he said. For an hour. I had the unhelpful thought that he wore silence the way I wore nerves, like an old sweater you pretend is a choice. I set my glass down before my fingers betrayed the shake. An hour, I said. No names, no lies that matter. He held out his hand, not palm up, not asking, simply offering a bridge. No promises, he added. I looked at his hand. The knuckles were strong, the nails clean, a faint white scar crossing the base of his thumb like math. Men like him didn't ask. He was giving me the dignity of being the one who chose. I slid my fingers into his. Heat skimmed my wrist, a static kiss under the chain. The club tilted again, and this time the shift felt like alignment. The crowd became current, guiding instead of pushing. And the hallway to the private exit opened like a held breath. Last chance, he said as we stood. His voice caught a thread on the word last, like maybe he believed in those after all. I squeezed his hand. I was never any good at last chances. For a heartbeat, something raw showed in his face, gone then, like a ripple smoothed by wind. He led, I followed, though it felt less like following, more like stepping into a rhythm that had been waiting for us. We passed mirrored columns that multiplied us into a parade I barely recognized, me, in a fitted black shirt pretending to be bolder than I was, him in steel and shadow. In one reflection, the light hit his eyes just right, and I saw the cool blade behind the calm. It should have scared me. It only steadied my feet. At the back corridor, the music hushed to a memory. The gold accents gave way to slate and quiet. He paused by the exit and turned to me, leaving that careful inch of space, as if the inch were a vow. 1 hour, he said. One night, I countered, pulse in my throat. Then we forget. We forget, he echoed, like a prayer he didn't believe in. He opened the door. The city air was cold enough to sting. Somewhere below, traffic hummed. Somewhere inside me, the animal lifted its head and said yes. We stepped out together, and the door clicked shut behind us with the neat finality of a promise broken before it could be made. Marek's apartment sat too high above the city, the kind of height that made lights look like dying stars. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the room, letting in nothing but darkness cut by neon veins far below. Inside, everything was glass and steel and cold geometry, like someone had given money to a ghost and told him to furnish the place. I barely noticed any of it. The door had closed behind us with the same neat finality as the club's, but here the air was different, thinner, sharper. My pulse had climbed into my throat and refused to come down. He didn't rush. That should have calmed me. It didn't. Marek moved like a man who never had to chase anything, like the world rearranged itself to meet him halfway. I was the one who kissed him first. 1 second I was standing there pretending I wasn't about to combust. The next his hand was at the back of my neck, steady but not demanding. And then the city vanished behind my eyelids because he tasted like winter smoke and rain. It wasn't careful. It wasn't slow. The coffee table clipped my hip as we stumbled past it. His jacket hit the floor, mine somewhere near it, and the trail we left was a map of reckless decisions. Shoes half kicked off. My chain tugged loose. The hollow clatter of my belt buckle against the floor. He didn't talk much, just breath against my skin, low and even, the occasional word that sounded like yes or closer. I told myself this was what I came for. Heat, distraction, something that didn't ask for more than my body could give. A disaster you walked into with eyes open, because at least this one was honest. So when it happened, I didn't understand at first. We were a mess of hands and teeth and heartbeat when his mouth found the line of my shoulder. A shiver crawled under my skin. The good kind, the kind you lean into. Then his breath hitched. His grip faltered like something inside him stuttered, like maybe for once he hadn't planned the next step. And then he bit me. Not hard enough to break skin, not soft enough to be mistaken for anything else. A flash tore through me, white-hot and soundless, like lightning behind the eyes. My pulse lurched. Heat rippled out from that single point on my shoulder, spreading too fast, too deep, threading into places no one had touched. Marek. It came out broken. Not his name. I didn't even know his name. Just a sound. He froze. I felt the tension lock his body tight against mine, the same way it locked mine against his. The air thickened, humming faintly. Or maybe that was just me. Maybe my blood had learned electricity. Don't. I tried, but the word cracked in half. My knees almost buckled. The city outside blurred until the lights streaked the windows. My chest rose too fast, lungs refusing to keep pace with whatever this was. My body knew something my mind didn't, reacting to some ancient instinct coiled in bone and nerve. I shoved him back. Not hard, couldn't have managed hard if I tried. But enough that space crashed down between us again. He let me. His eyes were wrong now. Not cold, not calm. Wide enough to show something I hadn't seen before, surprise, sharp and startled, like I'd just dragged him underwater. I didn't, he started, voice roughened. I shook my head. My pulse was everywhere, in my hands, my throat, still hammering against the place where his teeth had been. Heat crawled down my spine, restless, alien. No, I said, though I wasn't sure what I was refusing. He stepped forward, I stepped back. My heel hit the edge of a rug, and the uneven ground startled me like a gunshot. I need air, distance, answers. None of them lived here. He didn't follow when I grabbed my shirt from the floor. His jaw was set like someone swallowing words too big to chew. The apartment door was heavy, but it opened. My heartbeat didn't slow until the hallway's colder air slapped me hard enough to sting. I didn't look back. Behind me, Marek stayed silent, a dark shape framed by too much glass, and too many city lights, as if he already knew I wasn't going to stop running. My apartment had never felt this small. It was barely 2 rooms stacked on top of each other like a shoebox someone had slapped windows into. Usually I liked it that way. Cozy, quiet, the kind of place where plants survived because I actually remembered to water them. But tonight, the air pressed down like wet wool. I'd showered twice, opened every window, even changed the sheets. None of it helped, because my skin still hummed where his teeth had been. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling fan while my pulse tried to escape through my throat. Every few minutes it would kick into overdrive for no reason, like my body had joined a marathon without asking me first. And the smell, God, not the usual city mix of detergent and traffic fumes. Something warmer, sharper. It clung to me like I was carrying a piece of that night home under my skin. When I finally fell asleep, it wasn't real sleep. The dreams came hot and bright. Marek standing against the glow of his apartment. Windows, eyes dark, mouth saying my name like he'd always known it. His hands on my shoulders, steady enough to hold up the whole world if he wanted. I woke up tangled in sheets and sweat, the city already gray outside, the pulse in my throat still too fast. I was midway through convincing myself it was all in my head, when my best friend let himself in. "Morning, sunshine?" Liam called from the kitchen. The man had the timing of a sitcom character, always showing up right when I was least socially prepared. "There's coffee," I said hoarsely. "There's you looking like death reheated," he corrected, poking his head into the bedroom. Liam had the kind of grin that belonged in trouble. "Rough night? Finally let loose? Please tell me it was at least worth it." I yanked the blanket higher. "Define worth it." He leaned against the doorframe, holding his mug like a prop. "Well, on one hand, you look like someone set you on fire and forgot to blow you out. On the other, you're alive. So maybe a 6 out of 10? 5, I muttered. 4, he shot back cheerfully. Did you even sleep? Sort of. Those bags under your eyes say otherwise, champ. He squinted at me. Is this about work? Because you get weird about work, but this looks like a whole new level of tragic. I debated telling him. The words "some guy bit me and now I smell like him, and maybe my heart belongs to science fiction" didn't sound great out loud. It's fine, I said. I'm fine. You keep saying that like you're trying to hypnotize me. He sipped his coffee. Is this about that guy from the club? I stared at the ceiling. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, is he at least hot enough to justify looking like you wrestled a tornado? My silence was apparently answer enough. Liam whistled. Wow. That bad, huh? Not bad, I said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow. So, mysterious stranger, one night stand, and now you're lying in bed like a Victorian widow. Should I start planning the funeral? I threw a pillow at him. It missed. He grinned wider. Oh my God, you like him. I don't, I said. My pulse disagreed loudly in my ears. Then why do you look like you ran a marathon in your sleep? Unless that's your new skincare routine. Sweat, despair, and eye circles? I groaned into the blanket. Fine, don't tell me, Liam said, clearly delighted anyway. But whatever this is, maybe see a doctor before you spontaneously combust. Or, call the guy back before you die dramatically on your IKEA bed. I didn't answer. Because the problem wasn't calling him back. The problem was my body already acting like it had. The rest of the day blurred. Coffee tasted wrong. My phone felt too heavy in my pocket, like it expected me to dial a number I didn't have. The dreams clung to the edges of my vision even while I was awake, flashes of Marek's eyes, the weight of his hands, that strange heat where his teeth had been. By evening my chest still fluttered at random, heart skipping like a scratched record. I told myself it would fade. It didn't. And when night fell, I already knew the dreams were waiting. The rain made the office windows look like someone had drawn lines through the sky. Everything outside blurred into a gray smear. Traffic lights, umbrellas. The occasional taxi sliding through puddles like a yellow ghost. Inside, the building hummed with fluorescent lights and computer screens. The air too dry, the carpet too neat. I was halfway through pretending to read an email when I felt it. Not saw, felt. Like a change in pressure before a storm. The fine hairs at the back of my neck rose. And suddenly the room felt too small. He was here. I didn't have to look up to know it. When I finally did, Marek stood by the reception desk, rain still clinging to his coat like he hadn't bothered with an umbrella. The water hadn't softened him at all. He looked like the weather had been an inconvenience for the rest of the world, not for him. I froze in my chair. He didn't move toward me right away. Just watched, calm and unreadable, while the receptionist stammered through something about visitor badges. The line of his shoulders carried that same stillness I remembered, the kind that felt too precise to be relaxed. Then his eyes found me. The air dropped 5 degrees. I stood because sitting felt worse. This is unexpected, I said when he finally came closer. My voice tried for casual. It landed somewhere near strangled. I needed to talk, Marek said. No preamble, no small talk. His voice was low, steady, like he was afraid to startle me. Congratulations, I said. You found me. Gold star. Conversation over? He looked at me for a long moment, as if measuring the weight of words he hadn't spoken yet. Something happened that night. No kidding. I didn't mean for it to. He paused. The mark? Mark? My laugh came out sharper than I meant. That what we're calling it? Because it felt more like some medieval curse, just with better lighting. He didn't rise to the bait. It's not supposed to happen. Not like that. I crossed my arms. Mostly so he wouldn't see my hands shake. Enlighten me. Because I've been having some fun side effects, and WebMD isn't covering mysterious bite marks from handsome strangers. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. It only happens between true pairs. People whose bodies match. It's rare. I blinked. Match, I repeated flatly. Like a dating app for lunatics. He almost smiled. almost. It's not about dating. Good. Because this sales pitch is terrible. For the first time, something cracked through his composure. A faint crease near his brow, the smallest roughness in his tone. I'm not joking, Aiden. The sound of my name on his tongue hit somewhere low in my stomach. I hated that. I leaned back against the desk behind me, trying to look bored instead of wired like a live wire. Okay. Let's say I believe you. What does this magical mark do exactly? Besides wreck my sleep schedule? It links you, he said simply. Body to body. Sometimes, more. I stared at him. The rain hit the windows harder. That's insane, I said. Yes. His gaze didn't waver. And real. I laughed again. Too loud. Great. Fantastic. I always wanted a soulmate who shows up uninvited like a horror movie villain. That almost smile flickered again. I didn't choose this either. Yeah? Then what do you want from me? His eyes softened, just for a heartbeat, but I saw it. Nothing you don't want to give. The words landed heavier than they should have. I swallowed, throat dry. My body hadn't gotten the memo about being angry. It leaned toward him like gravity had rewritten itself overnight. Heat crawled under my skin where the mark had burned before, like it remembered him even if I didn't want to. I don't believe in this, I said finally. Neither did I, Merrick admitted quietly. The office felt too bright, too full of computer screens and bad coffee smells for this conversation. I wanted to tell him to leave. I wanted to ask him to stay. Instead I said, so what now? He shook his head once. I don't know, and somehow that unsettled me more than anything else. The rain had stopped sometime after lunch, but the streets still glistened like someone had poured the whole city into a mirror. I sat outside a cafe under one of those heaters that barely worked, clutching a cup of coffee I wasn't drinking. If I kept moving, coffee, errands, anything, I could pretend my pulse wasn't skipping every other beat. I could pretend my chest wasn't tightening every time Merrick wasn't around. Because that would be insane. I didn't believe in marks or fate, or whatever story he thought he was living in. This was biology, or adrenaline, or maybe caffeine poisoning, not destiny. I told myself that again when the edges of my vision blurred. It started like a low battery warning in my veins, slow, creeping weakness, the kind that made breathing feel like climbing stairs. My coffee sloshed when my hands shook. The door behind me opened, and I knew before I looked up. Merrick. The air seemed to steady when he stepped outside, like even the wind didn't want to argue with him. He wore black again, hair damp from the weather, shoulders set in that quiet way that made people get out of his path without knowing why. I hated how relief crawled through me before he even spoke. You're pale, he said, stopping a few feet away. No rush, no drama. Just observation. Low and steady. I'm fine. I lied. My voice cracked on the fine. He looked at me for a long moment, then at the coffee trembling in my grip. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. He didn't believe me. Obviously. Merrick stepped closer, but not close enough to touch. He always left that inch between us, like he knew I might run again. Like he wanted to. The tightness in my chest eased the second he moved into range. I hated that too. This isn't normal, I said finally, voice low. No, he agreed. It isn't. I don't want this. The words came out harsher than I meant. I didn't choose it either. That made me look up. His expression didn't change, but his eyes carried that same unsettled flicker I'd seen in the office, like he was holding back something heavier than words. Before I could answer, the cafe door slammed again. Aiden? Emma. Of course it was Emma. She worked 2 floors down from me, had a talent for hearing every piece of gossip, within a 10-mile radius, and owned at least 3 novelty mugs about wine. Right now she was staring between me and Merrick like she'd walked into the season finale of her favorite soap opera. Oh, my God, she said, drawing out each word like it was its own scandal. It's not. I started. Are you sick? She demanded. Is this him? Did he? Oh my God, are you breaking up? Are you eloping? Are you dying? None of the above, I snapped. She ignored me entirely, focusing on Merrick like he was a guest star brought in to spike ratings. "Who are you?" Merrick blinked once, clearly recalculating his life choices. He's nobody," I cut in quickly. Emma gasped like I'd slapped him. "Nobody? With those cheekbones? Please." Merrick's mouth twitched, like he wasn't sure if he should be offended or amused. Emma turned back to me, eyes narrowing with the thrill of impending drama. "You look like you're about to faint. Sit down. No, lie down. Do you need an ambulance? Should I call HR? Do we have HR for this?" "I'm fine," I said for the third time, which definitely made it true. She folded her arms. Because nothing says fine like hyperventilating in public with Mr. Tall, dark and mysterious lurking over you like a tragic novel cover. Merrick coughed softly into his fist, which I was 90% sure was hiding a laugh. I glared at both of them. There is no novel, there is no tragedy. Everything is perfectly. The tightness in my chest spiked. Merrick was at my side before I could finish, steadying the coffee cup out of my trembling hand before it spilled. His fingers brushed mine only for a second, but the air slid back into my lungs, like someone had opened a locked door. Emma saw it. Of course she did. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she whispered, delighted. "This is so better than HR." Merrick's apartment looked different at night. Maybe it was the rain streaking down the tall windows, blurring the city into a restless watercolor. Maybe it was the lamps. Low, warm pools of light instead of the sharp overhead glare from last time. Whatever it was, the place felt less like a glass box, and more like the eye of a storm, and I was standing right in the center of it, dripping rain onto his polished floor, pretending I wasn't trembling. He didn't come closer right away. Merrick leaned against the back of the sofa, jacket off, sleeves rolled, the white of his shirt faint against the dimness. His face stayed as unreadable as ever, but there was something about the line of his shoulders, tighter than usual, like he was holding the whole room still. "Sit," he said finally, voice low. I didn't. Sitting felt like surrender. Instead, I went to the window, watched the rain smear the city into something abstract and impossible. My pulse kept stuttering like it hadn't decided if it was scared or excited. Behind me, Merrick stayed quiet. He was good at that, filling silence without making it heavy. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. My reflection in the glass looked pale, eyes too bright. "Because you're shaking," he said. "And because you won't admit it. That doesn't answer the question." He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. "No. It doesn't." The air stretched tight between us. My chest ached with something I didn't want to name. Need, maybe. Curiosity. That magnetic pull that had been twisting me in knots since the mark burned into existence. I turned finally, met his eyes. "You always this calm? Or is it just for me? Would you prefer I wasn't?" I didn't answer, because part of me wanted him to lose control. Another part knew that if he did, I wouldn't know how to stop him. So I closed the space myself. 2 steps. 3. Close enough now to see the rainlight caught in his hair, the faint scar. At his jaw, the stillness in his expression that didn't reach his eyes. His hand tensed against the back of the sofa but didn't reach for me. I hated how much I wanted it to. So I made the first move, because maybe if I did, it wouldn't feel like fate winning. It would feel like choice. I caught his wrist, just lightly, the way you'd catch the edge of something sharp. He froze, eyes flicking to where my fingers rested against his pulse. "Can I?" he asked. The words landed like the softest thing in the room. Not a command. Not an assumption. A question. Something unknotted in my chest. I didn't realize how much I'd been bracing for him to take until he didn't. "Yes," I said. My voice cracked on it, small and shaking, but it was still yes. The distance disappeared in the next breath. His hands were careful at first, mapping the edges of my shoulders, my jaw, like he was afraid I might break. The kiss started slow, patient even when my pulse wasn't, even when I grabbed his shirt like I wanted to drag him closer than skin allowed. The storm pressed harder against the windows. Inside, everything narrowed to the weight of him. The steady way he held me like he was promising nothing, and giving everything anyway. I didn't feel scared anymore. My heartbeat still stammered, but not from panic. Something warmer pushed it now. Something that made my thoughts scatter until all that was left was heat and the soft catch of his breath when I kissed him back. When he lifted his mouth just enough to look at me, his eyes carried none of that cold distance from before. Only quiet. Only the kind of focus that felt like gravity choosing you on purpose. "Still want me to stop?" he asked. I shook my head. No. And the way he kissed me then, like I wasn't a mistake, like he'd been waiting for permission, his whole life, made me believe, for one wild second, that maybe I didn't want to run anymore. The night air cut sharp enough to hurt. Wind funneled down the narrow street, slapping my jacket open, carrying the smell of wet pavement and city smoke. Merrick walked beside me, silent as always, hands in his coat pockets like he didn't feel the cold at all. I hated how calm he looked. Like the kiss earlier hadn't happened, like my whole life wasn't coming apart at the seams while he just existed. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, when a voice slid out of the shadows. "Aiden?" I stiffened. Of course, because the universe wasn't done wrecking my life tonight. Ash stepped out under the streetlight, looking like sin dressed in leather. He always had that smile, lazy, sharp, promising trouble. He'd used it to ruin my heart 2 years ago, and apparently tonight he was here for the sequel. "Long time," Ash said, eyes flicking from me to Merrick and back. Or maybe not long enough. Merrick didn't react, didn't even look at him. Typical. I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" "Just checking on you." Ash's grin didn't reach his eyes. "Heard some things. About your new friend." I felt Merrick tense beside me, though his face stayed carved from stone. Ash tilted his head, studying him like a cat circling a bigger animal but too proud to admit it. "Funny thing," he went on. "Guys like him, always a price, and people like you, always pay it." My teeth clenched. "Not your business." "Everything about you used to be my business." Ash smiled wider, crueler. "Now I get to watch someone else break you? Guess that's karma." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the wind, or the day, or the mark burning faintly under my skin like it had been waiting for an excuse. I turned on Merrick before I could stop myself. "He's right," I said, voice sharper than the air. "Ever since you showed up, nothing's been normal. I can't sleep, I can't think, hell, I can barely breathe unless you're in the same zip code. What the hell did you do to me?" Merrick looked at me then. Really looked. No mask, no calm. Just something raw flickering through before he shuttered it again. "I didn't choose this," he said quietly. "Yeah? Well, neither did I." My hands shook, from cold or anger or both. "You waltzed in, marked me like some claim, and now everything's falling apart. My job thinks I'm losing it, my friends think I'm in some toxic romance. And maybe they're right because look at me." The wind whipped my words down the street. Ash watched like it was better than TV. Merrick didn't defend himself. Didn't deny a thing. "I should have walked away that first night," I threw at him. "Should have known trouble when I saw it." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low. "Do you want me to leave?" The silence after that hit harder than the wind. Ash smirked, enjoying every second. I swallowed against the knot in my throat. "Maybe I do." Merrick stood there a moment longer, something breaking quiet behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp and final, and turned away. No argument, no explanation. Just left, his coat snapping in the wind, like the night was swallowing him whole. Ash gave a low whistle. "Wow. Cold. Even for you." "Shut up," I snapped, shoving past him. But the damage was done. My chest ached in places the wind couldn't reach. I told myself this was what I wanted: space, freedom, my life back. So why did it feel like losing something I hadn't even had the right to keep? Sleep didn't come easy that night. When it finally did, it wasn't the kind that rested you. It dragged me under like a riptide, too fast to fight, until the world around me blurred and reformed into something I didn't recognize. I was standing in a city I didn't know. Snow drifted under streetlights, soft and silent, catching in the dark hair of the man leaning against a bar's brick wall. Merrick, except younger. sharper around the edges. His coat too thin for the weather, smoke curling from the cigarette in his hand. He looked like he belonged nowhere. A woman stumbled out of the bar behind him, laughing, pressing a kiss against his jaw. He let her, smiled even, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not once. The dream shifted, like pages turning too fast. Now Merrick sat in a hotel room, tie undone, a stranger's perfume hanging in the air. She was asleep beside him, makeup smudged, hair spilling across the pillow. He stared out the window like he was waiting for dawn to burn the night away. The emptiness in his face startled me. Another turn. Merrick in a sleek apartment that wasn't his, drinking something expensive out of the bottle, the city glittering beyond the glass. Music pulsed faint from another room, voices laughing, people kissing in doorways. And him, alone, even in a crowd. Always alone. Scene after scene blurred through me like film reels. Different faces. Different nights. The same hollow look once the doors closed. This wasn't a life. It was a loop. I wanted to tell him to stop. To breathe. To look at me. But I couldn't move. The dream shifted one last time. Merrick stood in a dark kitchen. Only the fridge light on. He leaned against the counter, head bowed, hands braced like he was holding himself up by will alone. No strangers here, no noise. Just the weight of too many empty nights pressing down. Something inside me cracked. I had thought he was untouchable, a man made of walls and winter. But here, in the fragments of his life, I saw the truth. He wasn't cold. He was tired. The mark between us pulsed faintly, as if agreeing. For him, this wasn't a trap. It wasn't a chain. It was the first thing in years that had broken the silence. I felt it then, his loneliness, deep enough to drown in. The way he'd carried it like penance, like armor, until it became the only thing he knew how to hold. And under it, something else. A flicker, like maybe he'd wanted more once. Wanted someone to stay. The dream softened. Merrick sat at a piano now, of all things, fingers resting on keys he didn't play. Dust coated the surface like it hadn't been touched in years. He looked lost, not angry, not bitter, just waiting for something that never came. I ached. Because suddenly I understood, the mark hadn't stolen his choices. It had given him one. Me. The realization burned through the dream until it all began to crumble. The piano, the empty rooms, the snow. Merrick turned toward me like he could feel me there, eyes catching mine across the collapsing space. For once there was no calm mask, no distance. Just that same quiet loneliness I'd mistaken for stone. Aiden, he said, soft, almost afraid. And I woke up with his name in my mouth and the rain starting again outside my window. The park was nearly empty. The kind of cold evening that drove people indoors. Snow drifted in lazy spirals under the lamplight, catching in my hair, melting against my coat. I spotted him on a bench near the frozen fountain, the black shape of his coat against the pale glow. Merrick sat like he was waiting for nothing at all, shoulders drawn in, face shadowed beneath the street lamp. For a second, I almost turned around. But the dreams wouldn't let me. I crossed the path slowly, crunch of snow loud in the quiet, until he finally looked up. Aiden, he said, like my name surprised him. Or maybe like he hadn't let himself hope I'd come. I stopped in front of him, breath clouding between us. You left. You told me to. Fair. I had. I just didn't think he'd listen. I shoved my hands into my pockets, words tangling in my throat. I saw things. Dreams. About you. His gaze sharpened. What kind of things? Enough, I said. Enough to know you've been alone for a long time. The wind gusted through the trees, shaking snow loose from the branches. I swallowed hard. I thought this mark was messing with my head, I admitted. Making me feel things I wouldn't otherwise. But it's not that. I hesitated, heat rising despite the cold. I want you. Not because of some bond. Because it's you. For the first time since I met him, Merrick looked unsteady. You don't know what you're saying, he murmured. Yes, I do. I stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw. The way his hands tightened where they rested on his knees. I'm tired of running. From this. From you. Something cracked in his expression then, small but real, like a wall losing its first stone. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said finally, voice low. "I didn't even want to touch you that night. And when I did, when the mark took," he broke off, shaking his head once, "I was terrified." "Of what?" His eyes lifted to mine, and for once, there was no distance in them. "Of wanting you," Merrick said. "Of you wanting me back. Of what that would mean if I lost it." The cold crept through my coat, but my chest felt too warm, too tight. "You're not going to lose me," I said softly. "You can't promise that." "Neither can you," I shot back. "But you're here. So am I. Maybe that's enough for tonight." Merrick stared at me for a long moment like he was memorizing the shape of those words. Then he nodded once, slow, like it cost him something to believe it. Snowflakes clung to his hair, melting against the heat of his skin. Without thinking, I reached out, brushed one away. He didn't move. "You still want this?" he asked quietly. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Something in his posture loosened, the first hint of relief sliding through his shoulders. He stood finally, tall enough to block the wind, and for the first time his hand found mine without hesitation, not claiming, not demanding, just holding. And for the first time, I didn't feel like running. Sunlight crept across my apartment floor, painting slow gold lines over the mess of blankets and coffee mugs. The world felt quieter after everything. No wind, no rain, no running. Merrick stood near the window, coat off, watching the city wake. His shoulders looked less heavy somehow, like he'd finally set something down. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart steady for the first time in weeks. "Still here," I said. He turned, faint surprise flickering across his face before settling into something softer. "You sound shocked. I half expected you to vanish with the sunrise," I admitted. Merrick shook his head. "Not this time." The mark pulsed faintly where it lay between us, quiet now, waiting. My chest didn't ache anymore. It just wanted. I stood and crossed the room, slow but sure, until I was close enough to feel his breath. "I'm not running anymore," I said. "If this is what it takes, if the mark means choosing you, then I want it." His eyes searched mine like he needed to hear it twice. "You're certain?" "Yes." I took his hand, pressed it over the place where the mark burned faint and warm beneath my skin. "Do it." For the first time since I met him, Merrick smiled. Small. Real. The heat spread through me in a rush, not the violent spark from before, but something steady, like fire learning to be a hearth instead of a storm. It sank deep, twining through blood and bone, until it felt less like surrender, and more like coming home. When it faded, Merrick's hand stayed over my heartbeat. "No more one-night ghosts," he said quietly. "No more leaving before the sun. Promise?" He nodded once, serious enough that I believed him. Of course, that was the moment the door banged open. "Okay," Liam announced, stepping in like he owned the place. "I brought donuts, coffee, and emotional support, but clearly I'm interrupting something biblical." Behind him, Emma leaned in, eyes wide like she'd walked into the season finale again. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're glowing." "Are you glowing? Is that a thing now?" "We're not glowing," I said. My voice cracked halfway through. "You're definitely glowing," Liam muttered, dropping the donut bag on the counter. "This him?" He squinted at Merrick like evaluating a suspicious contractor. "Tall, broody, looks like he wrestles wolves for fun." Merrick blinked slowly, clearly unsure whether to deny or confirm. Emma gasped. "Wait, is this the tragic romance guy? The one from the cafe? I told you he had cheekbones of destiny." I dragged a hand over my face. "Both of you. Out?" "Nope," Liam said, pouring himself coffee like he lived here. "I'm staying until I get details, or a wedding date." Emma grinned like Christmas had come early. "Do we get matching outfits? Please say yes." Merrick looked at me, expression caught somewhere between confusion and the faintest edge of amusement. "Friends of yours?" "Unfortunately," I muttered. Liam raised his mug in a toast. "To Aiden, who apparently has a boyfriend now, and to broody MC Tall over here for retiring from whatever tragic nonsense he was doing before. Emma clapped. Finally. I was so tired of watching you mope around like a Victorian widow. I glared at both of them, cheeks burning. But Merrick's hand stayed warm in mine, steady as sunlight crawling across the floor. For the first time, it didn't feel like a storm waiting to break. It felt like the start of something worth keeping.